to this screening of The Natural this afternoon. I want to let you know that we have a special guest, Mr. Barry Levinson, who is an Academy Award-winning director, screenwriter, and producer on hand, and director and producer of many of my favorite films, such as Diner and Good Morning Vietnam, Avalon, of course Rain Man, so many other phenomenal films over the course of his career. And yesterday had a virtually sold-out screening here of The Humbling, his latest film starring Al Pacino. So we're thrilled to be able to welcome him. And our guest moderator today is Mike Tackett. Mike Tackett, who has been a journalist for more than 30 years. He started out as a sports writer and ended up covering 7 presidential elections. Mike was Washington bureau chief for the Chicago Tribune, the managing editor for Washington for Bloomberg, and is currently the deputy political editor at the New York Times. He also has a forthcoming nonfiction book about a summer baseball team in Iowa that will be published by Houghton Mifflin. So ladies and gentlemen, please a warm welcome for Mr. Barry Levinson and Mike Tackett.
Thank you very much, and it's just a privilege, I know, for everybody here, and certainly for me, to have this chance to talk to one of the true greats of American filmmaking, and about one of the most remarkable films that he did. So let me start with this.
Sure.
Very few movies have real staying power. Usually they're measured maybe even in weeks in some sense. But The Natural is such a notable exception. It's always mentioned among the best baseball movies ever. When you reflect back, why did this movie endure, and why is it still so popular 25 years later?
The short answer is I don't know. Which is true. I mean, it's very hard to know why a movie lasts. Certain films do, and some don't. It's very hard to kind of put your finger on it. I mean, I do know at the time that, and we were talking about this earlier, that when we were going into production to do it, there was a lot of articles written about baseball movies don't work, the genre is dead, it's over, why would Redford, go into a movie that's so risky to do, etc. So there was a lot of negativity that surrounded it because there hadn't been a successful movie about baseball in a long, long time. And so, but we went down that road thinking, well, this is a good story. I mean, this is obviously larger than life. It is a fable, and we went, we just, pursued it, and it suddenly caught on, and has continued. I mean, even out during the World Series, they would do the Budweiser commercial, and they were playing the Randy Newman's The Natural theme in the background. So it lasted, and that's great. What can I say?
And it comes from a work of fiction, and obviously then becomes a label nonfiction. Every new star who comes up in baseball, they call them The Natural.
Yeah, and also, I think it was during the World Series, I forget what time, and they were intercutting what happened with Kirk Gibson, I think it was, who sort of was injured. He could hardly run, and he came up and he hit the home run for the Dodgers, and he was limping around the bases, and then they put the thing together the next day between Roy Hobbs and Kirk Gibson, and the intercutting of all those things, the improbable home run that Gibson, hit. And so, as crazy as so many things are in terms of, fiction and reality, a lot of them do, in fact, happen. I mean, some of the things that happen in baseball or football, you go, well, that's impossible, and it did, and that's part of what makes sports so fascinating, and what makes it interesting to find some piece of fiction that will work.
Take us behind the scenes a little bit in the making of this. What were your challenges in casting the movie, and who else, if anyone, did you seriously consider for the role of Roy Hobbs?
Well, no one, because it started, Redford had seen Diner, and he invited me to come up to Sundance. They had some, kind of film labs on the weekends and et cetera. So I came up there and then I met him and we talked and then we flew back to Los Angeles and he said, if you ever have some idea for a movie, we should, talk about it. And I remember thinking afterwards, Robert Redford, what's the odds of me doing a movie with Robert Redford? And so I had this idea for a film and I called and he said, well, let's talk about it. And I went to meet him and we spoke and he said that he didn't see it for him. It just didn't work. And then we just started talking about baseball. And we're talking about all these different things. And he said, I got a script. I got a script here somewhere. And he was thumbing through scripts and things, and he pulled it out. He said, yeah, did you ever read The Natural? I said, yeah. He said, take a look at the script. See what you think about it. And literally that, and I read it, and I said, well, I think it's great. It could be really interesting. And it literally happened like that. It's one of those kind of crazy stories that, talking about baseball led to it, and then he committed to it, which was brave on his behalf, because I only made a small movie, diner, and then suddenly there's this large fantasy fable about, baseball, but he was, committed to it, and that's how it began. That's how it started. I mean, there were a lot of things along the way. I mean, I remember talking to a studio person. I said, he said, well, who are you thinking about for music? I said, Randy Newman. And Randy at that time wasn't particularly known in terms of scores. And I remember they kept saying, you mean the guy who did Short People? I said, yeah. And Randy, I think he would be good for it. The guy who did Short People? And it was a real argument to get him okayed by the studio. And just as a little, these are some of the crazy things that happen when you do films. We had a preview for an audience, a test screening, and it seemed to play well. We went across the street with the studio people, and we sat down. And the first thing one of them said as we're sitting there, he said, at the ending, you have some music that's bigger? And I said, you mean bigger than the ending we have? Because it goes, ba-ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. There's something bigger than that. And I said, no, that's it. And well, look around. Maybe you'll find something there that was bigger. Try it. Like it lying around somewhere on the floor. Bigger.
You also had someone in the movie who became even better known in Robert Duvall, currently starring in the movie The Judge. What did he show you in terms of his range and his character in The Natural?
Look, he's a great actor, and it was interesting because he had won the Academy Award, I think, the year before for Tender Mercies, and Redford had won as Best Director, Academy Awards. So I'm sort of surrounded by all of these Academy winners. He's a great actor, and he just sort of latches on to character, and you talk about it, and you just sort of, after that, it's really how much and how do you want to tune it, because he really gets into it. He really zeroes in on a character he can work with.
The Natural, one of its many gifts as a movie is it's got such a natural narrative arc, and goes to the idea of the hero myth in our culture. But tell us sort of how and why you thought it was also really important and powerful to demonstrate Roy Hobbs' flaws during the movie.
Well, that goes back to Malamud. In that, what he did was he took a lot of the baseball stories. Eddie Waitkus was the first baseman who was actually shot by this woman who was sort of stalking him, and he took that, and he took the story about the guy who ran through, the wall and knocked himself out and had a concussion, and I can't remember all of the various things that he pulled from, baseball lore into it, and the Babe Ruth, connections and all of those things. So he put all these things together with this flawed character, a young boy, man who was immensely talented with this, flaw in his character, and then the redemption of it in a way. But Malamud ultimately had him, strike out at the end, which always became a thing with critics, where you change the ending. I can imagine doing a movie, 2 hours and 20 minutes, and then just go, strike three, you're out. And then you fade to black.
One of the things that it's always a risk, I guess, for an actor to try to do something where there's a lot of physicality involved and a lot of trying to demonstrate that you're plausible and authentic. What was it like to work with Redford as a baseball player, and how did he actually do in the scenes that you shot?
Well, I mean, he's very good. I mean, he's very good. He can hit well, and he can run well, and he was good in the outfield. So we didn't have to really cheat that. He loved baseball. He loved Ted Williams. That's why he has the number 9 in the movie. So that wasn't as big a problem as you might in some other films. That was sort of the easy part. Sometimes it's harder when you say you have to swing and miss, because sometimes he gets all pumped up and they're all cheering for him, and he didn't want to strike out sometimes.
Did he ever actually hit a home?
I don't remember. I know that he hit the ball to the wall. He may have. I can't remember, because we actually had a fairly short right field porch, as it turned out.
When you're making the movie and you're reflecting back and you're looking at some of the scenes, what's the scene where you tell yourself, we nailed it, this is the scene they're going to be talking about for years? Maybe other than the final scene.
Well, the final scene was where we blow up the lights and everything, which took nights and nights to do. Was really difficult, because this is all before CGI, so you actually had to blow up every night. We would end the night where Redford around first, and we'd blow up the lights over by first base, and then the end of the second night, he's rounding second, and you blow up the lights, and then he's coming around third, and you're blowing up lights, and it was like night after night after night, the last shot we would do. And it was tedious, and because you don't have the advantage like, nowadays when I think about, and I don't know if this would occur to you, is like, say you have a first baseman, and you're supposed to have 6,000, we have 6,000 extras, and the stadium is supposed to be filled, completely filled. It's a playoff game. So if somebody throws to first base, and the first baseman reaches to catch the ball, and you go, it's great, but then the cameraman said, well, he went a little to his left, and we could see the empty seats. And now you have to do it again, because you can't fill it in later. So every one of those shots, it becomes a real issue in terms of left or right, because you can't see the empty seats. And because it takes so long to fill the seats up, you have to shoot everything out of continuity. So if you understand this, we'll do everything facing first base. Everything for the entire game. So if it's nothing more than, the guy on first base, come on, Roy, and then every little piece has to be done, so there's no continuity to anything, because we can't keep moving 6,000 people from first base to third base, behind home plate, back to first base, we can't do it, so we have to do everything piecemeal, and everything is out of order, and there's no continuity in order to put it together, and there was about 500 setups to build that. Nowadays, you can just fill up the whole stadium. You couldn't do that back then. We even tried where we had cardboard cutouts. We put them out there, but you could tell that, the light would bounce off of them. And so we couldn't go with the cardboard cutouts. But the logistics of it were really difficult. And then finally, just putting it together and going, oh, thank God it actually works. Because it was such a tedious task.
When you think about baseball and why baseball is something you talked about earlier, there was some skepticism about whether or not baseball was really sort of a good vehicle for a movie, and yet it begat so many other baseball movies after that. Why do you think that is? What is it about sort of the enduring power of baseball?
Well, I think, baseball is a marathon. It's a long season. And so it has all these kind of dramatic arcs over the course of it. Football happens in a much shorter period of time. Baseball has this long arc, so like for several months, the team may not be doing well, all of a sudden they start to come together. Like Kansas City didn't play well for almost half a year, and all of a sudden they started to get better. And so there's a drama to it that differs from the other sports, because you start in April and you finish in October. It's a long haul, and a lot of things happen along the way.
So would Bull Durham have happened, would the Major League Series have happened, would other movies like that have happened without the success of The Natural?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I don't know, because it was really not thought of as a commercial type of thing to do. And then when the film worked, then all of a sudden it was like, oh, you can have a baseball. And then all of a sudden, there was Bull Durham and all those others that came after that.
Talk a little
Yeah,
bit.
but that's the thing that they're always saying. When some movies don't do well, like there was a period that said, any historical films don't work. Period films don't work. And you go, well, you can't do a film in the 1800s. Nobody cares about the 1800s. They don't. It's got to be contemporary. Nothing in the past works. There was a period of time, literally, they come up with these concepts as if we can't sit through a movie that was set in the past. In fact, the biblical movies at one point said, no, that's over, it's done, can't happen anymore. It's the end of the biblical movies, no one cares. And now all of a sudden then they came back and one did well, and then all of a sudden everybody went around and you're going to go do it. So there's always that period of you can't make that movie, and if one succeeds, then all of a sudden there's going to be a whole bunch that follows.
You talked about this a little bit, but could you address a little bit more just the power of the soundtrack in this movie? Because that really is something a lot of people still remember and take with them.
And this music.
Yes.
I'll tell you one thing which was really a great experience. We were under the gun to deliver this movie because it was going to be TriStar's first film. They were a new company. It was going to be their first film. So we had a race to finish the film. And I was in this room with the editor, and on the other side of the wall was Randy Newman with a piano writing music. And I heard the beginning of The Natural, the theme, through the wall. And I could hear him going, he's going, da-da-da, ba-ba-da, and all of a sudden, and then I heard him actually find those notes that became the signature for it. And then sometimes I'd hear him playing a piece of music, and if we happened to be somewhere near it at the Ken, I would say to the editor, speed down to that and start to play it against the music we can hear in the other room. And sometimes it would fit, and I go, that's what he's working on. He's working on striking out the whammer and catching the train, and sometimes I could guess that's what he might have been doing. So it was really kind of fascinating that you're actually hearing the birth of a piece of music through the wall, as opposed to hearing when the composer comes in. So I could hear it actually starting to happen, which is, to this day, fascinating.
And here was somebody who had sort of almost been caricatured, right? That he'd written this one song and he was sort of defined by that, but his talent was so much fuller than that.
Yes. In fact, I mean, the reason that I thought that Randy, first of all, he's a big baseball fan. And secondly, on an album he has called Good Old Boys, I think it's a song called Louisiana. And the very beginning of it, there's sort of this orchestral piece, and it sounded very Americana to me. And I thought, whoa, he's really got that in his bones. And because of hearing that little thing at the front of one of the songs, we got to meet, and that's why I wanted to use it.
And take us back again to that climactic final scene. How many times you had to shoot it, what the degree of difficulty was, and how it would be different with today's technology?
Well, today's technology, first of all, you wouldn't have to have them run around first base and blow up the light tower, behind them and do that. You have them run around the first base, and they'll put in everything after that. All you have to do is shoot the light tower, and they'll do all of that. So that would all be simplified, and you wouldn't really need a crowd at all. All you can have is just get some, and then they'll multiply it and make it like thousands, and then in the big shots, they'll just fill it all in with this kind of crowd enhancement. So it's much, much easier to do than it would have been then, because we had to actually do it for real. Because those light towers, and we actually had to rig them, the big shots. You had to rig every one of those things to keep blowing up and doing all that stuff. Or now it's all just digitally done.
After you'd finished the movie and justifiably, I'm sure you were so proud of it, what what were the sort of the key messages? What did you want the person in the audience taking away from the movie when it was over?
Well, I always find that difficult to say, because it always sounds pretentious. To me, is what you want to do is you want to create a story and characters that an audience can relate to in some way, even if it's something that they've not experienced or whatever. But for them to enter into a time of characters and get caught up in that world, and to be able to hold their attention and have them to be so connected that they're beginning to, I hope this happens or whatever, or be surprised, and all of the emotions that you go through as an audience, you want to just take them on that journey. Yeah, that to me is, you want that to work. And then of course, I don't like to start with, I want to get this across to the audience. I want that, we're all going to go on this journey, this adventure.
So then, just from your own personal experience, then when you distill this movie, the message of this movie into like a declarative sentence, what would it be?
Well, see, I can't really do that very well. That's why sometimes they say, well, just give me a sentence, what the movie's about. And I go, no, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do it even with, Diner or any of the others, where you can with some of this, like, superhero things. That you can do. These all seem more complicated to me.
And when you look at this in the context of your career, without, I guess you wouldn't pick a favorite necessarily, but what did this do for you in terms of your own career and giving you just sort of a fundamentally different range of opportunity?
Well, it was so different from Diner. It's the second movie I did. So I did a little movie in Baltimore with, 5 guys in 1959, and all of a sudden this is a big canvas and a big flamboyant piece, this fable, and this very kind of stylish movie, as opposed to the simplicity of Diner, where you don't want anything to, you want it to just feel like it's real, like it's, that people are just talking and making things up. So this is very radically different. But my interest in films have been radically different. I mean, I do go from one extreme to another into what I like, but also as an audience, I like to go see, when I was a kid, I loved like these Italian comedies. I loved them. I was just fascinated how the Italians could take things that are sort of very human and be able to get, humor and drama out of it. I thought that was really interesting. On the other hand, I love the British, like, inward comedies. They're really kind of broad comedies. And even sometimes I didn't even know what they were talking about, but they seemed funny to me. What they were saying, their behavior, these Peter Sellers things. So I liked a lot of different kinds of movies. I was always fascinated by that. And so I've tried to make, not deliberately, but I've been somewhat eclectic, and as opposed to staying in one particular area. I like just jumping in and out of different types of work.
Well, I know that people would probably love to sit and listen to you for another hour or so, but I also know that you have a plane to catch, and you've been very generous with your time, and we certainly appreciate it. It's incredible to think that this was only the second movie that you had made, and maybe it gives sort of new meaning to who was the real natural here in terms of your career. So, but thank you very much for being here.